you. Please be seated. And we're back on the record in 14 CR 1432. Mr. Jones still here in custody. He's represented by Ms. Smith and Mr. Colvin. Mr. Rubenstein and Mr. Wade are both here for the people. We're outside the presence of our jury. Anything before we resume with our jury, Mr. Wade?
I don't think we have anything, Judge.
Mr. Colvin?
Not for the defense.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and call for our jury then. All right, thank you. Please be seated.
download the stuff that's
And what were what type of pictures were you going to print?
that's just download the stuff that's on the computer. Honestly, not.
Because Lane probably would have been very upset with you if she found you printing off porn. No,
I think
yes.
any site I have to go to find porn, I gotta pay for it, and I'm not, wasn't gonna do that.
What are you thinking right now?
Well, I was just thinking all the things I was trying to hide, I wish it's coming out.
We'll get you out of here real quick.
So you gotta change out of clothes, huh?
Yeah.
We'll be a few minutes before Sergeant Ryder comes back in. I just don't know, from a perspective about relationships and being a woman, I mean, I understand the dilemma that you're in right now. Elaine seems like a very caring woman, and sounds like she knew you before. What ended that relationship?
I met Lisa. My second wife.
And Lisa was married at the time. Did that break Elaine's heart? She was very much in love with you, wasn't she? And she says that that's what happened. So, you know, she has a real strong emotional attachment, feeling, love, whatever you want to call it. I know guys sometimes are afraid of the love word and the intimacy that is attached with that. I think she is a woman who will stand by you for the long haul. What do you think?
Things are pretty tense at home right now. It's just pretty rough.
And you know what? That intensity is probably due to the uncertainty because she doesn't know if she can stand
I understand.
the unfaithfulness and the untruthfulness.
I
Would you agree?
I do understand that.
Because I think in her faith, in her love for you, she would stand beside you no matter what. I know that you say you've been trying to hide. She's going to find out everything that you've been hiding from her. And that's not going to be easy for her. This issue of not knowing is going to be hard for her.
She'll let her know she can never trust me again.
So how can you make her trust you?
I just find that's.
But I've been in that relationship where time can either make or break the relationship. And the only thing that really is the healing factor is the honesty, feeling that you can trust that person again.
I understand that.
How can we get her to trust you
We
again?
have been honest with each other about this. I told her all, I mean,
You think you're gonna have to, right? That's gonna be a tough road. Does she cry when does she get angry? Some? Does she, are they angry tears or are they quiet tears or?
I don't know.
towards Ryan. That she fell in love with before and is in love with again.
They're young again.
She's a woman that will stand behind you, beside you. But I don't think that she can do that without having all the questions answered. Would you agree? Because she's going to have a bunch of them. Did she ask you, did you do this? And what'd you tell her?
Told her. I was honest with her. I told her that I didn't believe when I said, at least the one lady. I think it's the lady, you know, like I said, can I confuse the pictures with the pictures and everything else? But I told her it was what there, I told her the Gail was at the house.
Oh, that was huge. That was a huge step right there. Admitting that you brought an escort into your own home,
I know.
into her and your intimate world, right? That was a huge step. How'd she take that?
Oh, no.
Well, we've got to stop her feeling the pain. If you had anything to do with Miss Mel, it takes a huge man, it takes a huge man. And I'm asking you for Elaine. Because we knew today she was not going to be doing well again. And we don't want anything to happen to her. She's innocent in this whole thing. Because one thing that you may mention to me or to us during this interview is its choices. Those choices have been huge in your world, and now they're going to be huge in ours. If you met with Paige on that night, we need to know now so that we can figure out what happened to her after that meeting.
I understand that, but I didn't meet with her. And I understand what you're asking.
You know what I'm asking of you, but I'm asking in also in the shoes of Elaine.
I understand that. I never met her, Paige. I never called her. I didn't talk to her. I didn't meet with her. You're asking me to reach in and do something that I didn't intend to do. And I have been telling the truth, and I'm not involved in her disappearance. I'm not,
But you did write it on the card.
no, I didn't.
see the girl on you. It's evident. You can see this in the heels. And I want you to do the right thing. And it is, you can't do the right thing for anybody but yourself. Just do it for yourself. If it can be lame, it's for yourself. 56 years old, you know how things work. It's better to tell the truth. And it's better to give it out in the open. You cannot dispute it. It's the only thing that's gonna happen. Because in the end, the fury, the wrath will come so hard, you won't be able to stop it. We're not there yet. But you have an opportunity. And then somehow, in it all, one felt said the truth will help you manage. And that's the only thing you can ever concentrate on. That's the only thing that matters. You have a chance now to, because Elaine loves you. She cares for you. She wants you. But she's got to have the truth. And we have to have the truth. Because our truth will be out in public. People will know. Yeah. If it's how you do it, and you have to cry on it, it's on. You just destroy everything. Destroy yourself too. I want you to think about it. Okay? I want you to go home. I want you to think about everything we talked about. I want you to look at your wife. I want you to spend time with her. I want you to ponder this. I want you to search deep in your soul. And I want you to call back. And I think as you sort it out, it's hard now because you're scared, but as you sort it out, choice that's free. Thus, you being a, you have a good foundation. You build. Too much damage.
I don't know.
What's breaking?
I don't know. I don't know. I think she's been surpassed everything.
If, and I don't continue to say, it's still, you call me. I get it on that. And, it's all right, but, she has that, just, Elaine's very angry at first. But when the truth and the fact that, and then this is against to aggravate to me is bad. With total honesty, following up with counseling, to know the things that she wants you to do. With knowing the whole truth, the deepest, most things out. Is it in her to do this to Mario?
I don't know that.
You heard her once.
I heard it twice.
By leaving her for Lisa.
I heard it during this time, that's twice.
Okay. So that's why we've got to stop her. Gotta stop the pain. And the pain is what she's experiencing right now. And sooner is better. Agreed?
You know, it's what do you mean by your hand shaking so much? Just your hands just shake so much. You gotta let it go. There's only one way. You got to let it go. I know you heard your man. There's a way out. There's the truth. And it could be no truth, it doesn't get you understand. The truth in this case will keep you. Everybody's got to think. Because I know you did intention to it.
I did do
I
it.
know you did intention to it.
I didn't do it.
Remember I said you're not a monster. Remember me saying that?
I remember that.
could understand that this just happened to be an accident versus a calculated incident. In order to start the healing process, in order for her to feel comfortable being held in your arms again, she's got to understand that this was accidental.
Yes, you should be.
Because in your heart, you probably had a fear, even when you had the veil, that Elaine might find out. No questions about that. There's always that fear. What if I get caught? But sometimes that curiosity, those sexual urges overcome that fear of getting caught. And the second contact just went bad from the get-go. Because Paige is in the area where you work. When she goes missing.
I understand that.
What you don't understand is there's no way you can explain. You get that?
And we are part of the link. I could help Elaine understand. Right?
I understand all that.
We're not here to destroy you. We're not here to destroy Elaine. We can be that conduit to help her understand what happened.
And you know, before we shared today, you didn't destroy your house. You didn't tell all these things. You've proven that. You get that?
I'll disagree with it. I know what you're saying too. But I gotta get right back in your face and say, it didn't take your officer last week, but 30 seconds to go right from here to Elaine and tell her everything I told her. That's it. Didn't even give me a chance to talk to Elaine first.
Yeah. Right. Right. We had to, because we had, this was the first time we talked to her, we had to find out what we know. They didn't tell everything, but they told something. Right. I don't know if we could have changed that. To be honest, I don't know if we changed that, because we had to know what she knows.
I understand that.
So you're right. I can understand you next.
But on the heels of that, Elaine, if the cops are coming to talk to her, she's going to want to know why.
Well, she knows why.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, some information exchange has to happen. Not to destroy you. Oh, and definitely not to destroy her.
She knows that.
We have to do an investigation, and that hurt her. I can't let you go to her first. And tell her when we first getting into it. But I'm just telling you that's what I would do, so that wouldn't happen. Because you know what, you had that pissed you off, that's not good. I will do that for you. I will let you tell her the truth. I'll do that. Take it for you. I will do that. Because I understand that. I understand my side too. We didn't have a choice. But I can see how that hurts. Anyway. I would like to have you out here. because you have the private process as quick as can. I'm hoping that tomorrow I'll have.
He's not always supposed to get to work.
We're gonna try to monitor, we're gonna try to get your Chevy done as quick as we can, and the title done as quick as we can. We have people working on it today, calling through to look for any kind of evidence. So I'm hoping tomorrow we get worst case scenario they have.
And would you agree, Ralph, that as long as it takes, whether it includes you or excludes you, would you agree? If it exonerates you from being, any involvements, would you agree? As long as it takes.
I agree with that, but as long as Smith tells me I can't drive 3 cars at one time, as long as Smith tells me.
Absolutely.
Well,
So,
by your own mission, you drove off the cars.
no, I haven't drove her car.
You had a car, so
I don't know if I've ever drove her car, so. Well, yeah, I have. I've taken it to work and changed the oil, so I have drove her car.
and you're right, as you said, I remember you drove the Chevy and the truck back and forth. So we gotta check those things. We'll try to get her, return as fast as we can, and we feel that in mind. Good news, it's not much good, but it's one second. We didn't, we use such transportation. That's, I know, but we'll work fast. Give us the same grace, work with us.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna give you my card, and I want you to think about this, because you're gonna spend a lot of time. Get this squared away, it has to be squared away. Call us a couple days, because that has to be resolved. If it's not resolved, once you throw it together, and once you get out of it. Any other questions you have?
Am I grounded to the county, or
No? No?
we have plans, we're still planning on going to Steamboat this weekend, if we have to drive out to the Red Motel.
The key for us will be on this phone. That's going to be quick, that's going to help. The next issue is using physical evidence. As we process all of this evidence, there's hundreds of pieces. One piece of physical evidence will connect besides what we already have. But at that point, pressure really starts. So I would urge you, before we get to that place, get in here, tell us how it happened, and is there consequence? But it's a lot lighter. If you stick by what you told us today, this isn't me,
I never said that.
But
Well, I didn't tell you what I was buying.
but it's not, it's you by yourself. We have exact times mentioned, so if you stick with it, it's not your back check on call and all those different things. When we get to physical evidence, all we can assume is premeditation, if you thought about it, you intended to kill her. That's all it leads to, because you're part of the hidden phone, you did all this, and then you're in a meeting, and you're the only person who tells us what happened. Later on, the physical evidence might tell us. But you're the only person who now can tell us what happened with that interaction. You have an opportunity, you have a limited time clock. And I'm very forthright. There's a very limited time clock. You get your story out as to how that happened. At the point that ends, there's a grass, there's things like the age, courts, all those different things going. And there's going to be prosecution of
interview with you, the officer and Elaine shared information on the heels of what Sergeant Myers talking about. This is your opportunity. When the story comes to us, Elaine will know firsthand before you come in and tell us the whole story. Does that make sense? This way you've got Elaine, you can tell her what happened, and I'll bet, looking at her, I'll bet she'll be by your side.
Not right away, but I think she will. I think she's curious. I think she's curious today just because her house was searched and the car was taken. But I think if you honest and work with, you can continue on and humble yourself. The key is to humble yourself. If I've done wrong, if I will do what I can to rectify it, to change it. And give it the opportunity. And I think that's wise advice I can give you. Humble yourself, truthful, give it a good shot at that. I didn't talk to her, but listen to the answer. How she loves you. Gonna have words, she's gonna be angry tonight. I would anticipate today, if you want to stay safe. Good communication. But you already had a couple of things. Biggest part you're gonna get through is explaining this to her ass. When you get through that, then you know it comes through. Are there any questions? I know you guys can work. We will get an officer to give you a, we appreciate it, and I just want to confirm, when we started this way, you initiated this, you wanted to talk with us, we didn't force you to come talk, we had to do that pretty well. We understand. Did we force you to talk? No, coerced, because I'm forced. Coerced? Yeah. Why you coerced? Did you stand in down there when they asked me to come down? No. Okay. Yeah. That was just thought it would be to my best interest to do it, so. Okay. Joe.
Mr. Waite, how do you want to proceed?
Your Honor, if Sergeant Weiler could be called back to the stand, I've got a few questions for him left.
All right, and just for the record, you finished playing exhibit number
Exhibit number 701.
701?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, sir.
All right, thank you. You can proceed whenever you're ready, Mr. Waite.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Sergeant Weiler, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I just had a few questions for you about that interview. Initially, it appears as we go through the interview that it skips around a few times and kind of skips portions. Are those the parts that were removed by agreement of the parties because they weren't relevant to the case?
That is correct.
Okay. So that's the reason that occasionally we'll see it skip ahead a little bit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when you were doing this interview with the defendant, did you guys talk about the meeting with Carolyn or Gail
Yes.
on June 27th?
Yes.
And did he indicate to you in the interview that it was later in the evening than was her estimate about when that happened?
Correct. He believed it was around between 9 and 10.
Okay. Now, also, it sounded like during the course of the interview, did he indicate to you that he and Elaine Jones actually talked over the issue of when he got home Sunday night?
I'm sorry, they talked over.
There was an issue about when he returned to the house Sunday night after going down to Bob Scott's. Did he indicate to you in the interview that he and Elaine actually talked that over to try and decide what time he had come home?
Excuse me, Judge, I apologize. I'm getting an indication that his mic is not on.
Okay.
There should be a button.
Is there a green light on? Good, thank you.
Yes, they did talk. They talked about, Elaine had talked about and had some discrepancy as to what time he had left and what time he had gotten home.
His initial indication had been that he got home around 10:10 that evening.
That is correct.
Now, during the course of that interview also, you asked him several times about whether or not he had made any phone calls to Paige Bergfeld on June 28th. And his response was what?
He had never made phone calls on June 28th,
Okay. Now,
On
you were
any
asking
phone.
him, I'm sorry?
on any phone.
Okay, you were asking him about several different phones, so he didn't indicate that he'd made a call on any of the phones?
That is correct. He
Okay.
did not.
Despite your confronting him a number of times, in fact, a fair number of times, did he ever admit to you that he bought a track phone?
He never admitted that he bought the track phone.
Okay. There's a portion in the interview where it looks like you show him something. What is it that you show him?
I show him video pictures of himself entering Walmart at the register number 68 in the, I guess, video equipment area, as well as later I show him a receipt.
Okay. And despite being shown those things, at first he had, what does he respond to you when you ask if that looks like him?
He says it looks like me.
But then would he go on to admit that he purchased the track phone?
No. Initially, obviously, he didn't admit to being at Walmart whatsoever, just saying he went to City Market. Then he ultimately states that he did go to Walmart, and then ultimately he says that he bought a Monster cable, which the packaging did not fit that.
And initially in the interview, he's unable to come up with a time that he actually went to Walmart and purchased anything.
Correct.
Okay. Now, as you were talking to him about the track phone, at that point during the interview, had he already talked to you about the escorts that he'd visited, his visits with the escorts, and had he expanded on what he had told Lisa Norcross?
Yes, he had. When he's met with Investigator Norcross, he talked about only being 2 times. When he met with me, he talked about 5 times, 5 different girls.
Okay. So he'd already talked about more escorts than what he had talked about with Lisa Norcross?
Correct.
Okay. Had he also, had you already talked to him about what Elaine
Somewhat, yes.
Okay. Had he already talked about contacting escorts on his personal cell phone?
He had.
Okay. And despite all of that, despite having talked to you about all of those issues, did he continue to deny the purchase of the track phone?
He still continued to deny to the very end.
In fact, it sounded like over and over he denied that.
Too many times to count.
Okay. And he also asked you, or you asked him about how he got the gas down to burn up the vehicle. What was his response about whether or not they had gas at work?
He stated they did not have gas at work. He stated he did not bring the gas can. And so I asked him, did he go and buy the gas? And he denied that.
Okay. And what did he say about the gas can that was located right at his workbench there at Bob Scott?
Well, initially, he wasn't clear as to whether it would be there. I had to point out that it was found right underneath, and he stated that that would have been there, as well as several other gas cans.
Did he ever indicate that that was his gas can?
He stated it was not his gas can.
Okay. There's a point at which he leaves the interview room and then comes back dressed differently. Why?
At that point, we had collected his clothing and boots.
Okay. So you collected some clothing and you had some replacements there available for him?
Yes, his wife had brought some clothing down to him.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I don't have anything else undirected.
Thank you. Cross-examination, Ms. Smith.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Counselor.
Okay, so when you interrogated Mr. Jones, he had already been interrogated once before, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was about 2 weeks prior to
I
yours?
believe on July 5th. Yes.
Okay, and this one was July 18th?
Yes, ma'am.
And Investigator Norcross did the first one, right?
Yes, and Investigator Puchota.
Oh, right. And they didn't get a confession from Mr. Jones.
They did not.
So investigators wanted to interrogate Mr. Jones again,
Yes,
and this time you did it.
correct.
And you were a sergeant at that point, right?
I was, yes.
And the other person in that interrogation is Investigator Gerald, right?
Formerly Investigator Gerald, yes.
Okay, former Investigator Gerald, and at the time, she was the lead investigator on this case.
She was.
Now, Sergeant Weiler, you're a very skilled interrogator.
I've had lots of training and done it a lot, yes.
Okay. You've had a long career in law enforcement,
I have.
and you were an investigator from 1985 to 2001.
Correct.
In 2001, you were promoted to sergeant,
Yes, ma'am.
and you were the sergeant over the complex crimes unit here in Mesa County from 2006 to 2008.
Yes, ma'am.
Complex crimes is persons crimes.
That is correct.
And you've even been a lieutenant at one point in your career, right?
Yes,
Now, you're currently a sergeant with the sheriff's office.
I am, yes.
And as a sergeant, you obviously have higher rank over the investigators.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And part of earning rank is through training and experience, right?
It can be, yes.
Sometimes it just get handed to you?
Well, no, it doesn't get handed to you, but
You have to be good at what you do to be a sergeant, right? In Mesa
you can be
County?
a good investigator and not be a good sergeant. So it helps to have training and experience, but you could be a good leader and not be a good investigator.
I see, okay. So the difference there is between investigations and leadership.
Correct.
But in your case, you obviously have extensive experience in the leadership position,
Yes, ma'am.
but you also have extensive experience as an investigator, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, over the course of this career of yours, you've conducted numerous interrogations,
In the thousands, yes.
and many of those were of people you suspected of murder.
Yes.
So, I'm sorry, kind of lost my train of thought here, but you have, so I guess we've established you have extensive experience as an interrogator, right?
Yes, ma'am.
But you also have a lot of training in conducting interrogations.
I do. Hundreds of hours of training.
Okay. And that's hundreds of hours of training just in conducting interrogations.
Yes, over 100 hours, as
Okay.
well as I train others to interview and interrogate.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that in a second. I want to talk a little bit about why training is necessary to conduct a skilled interrogation. Is that because there's techniques that go into conducting an interrogation?
Techniques as well as laws, rule of laws that you have to follow.
Okay. And in addition to rules and law, there's techniques and there's a skill to it, right?
There's many different skills, yes, but many different techniques.
And so there's a lot, it sounds like there's a lot to learn about conducting an effective interrogation.
Yes,
And as you mentioned previously, you do it so well that you actually train other law enforcement officers on how to do it.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And you go around the country to train investigators on how to conduct effective interrogations.
Only once outside of the state, but most of the time throughout the state.
Oh, okay. And you've been, in addition to conducting interrogations, you've been training on interrogations for over 20 years.
That is correct.
So you know a lot about this part of conducting an investigation, right?
Yes.
And to be a good, skilled, experienced interrogator means you're good at getting people to confess.
I guess I believe I'm good at getting people to tell me the truth, but
Okay.
not always guaranteed.
Now, turning to this interrogation you did of Mr. Jones on July 18th, this was about 5 hours in total, right?
It was, yes.
And you're clearly accusing Mr. Jones of murdering Ms. Bergfeld.
I am, yes.
And you agree that there are parts of this interrogation that are very accusatory.
There are, yes.
And you acknowledge that to Mr. Jones. You say, I know this sounds accusatory.
I do, yes.
So it's clear what's going on here, right?
It should be clear to him, yes.
Okay. And in the face of 5 hours of accusations of murdering Ms. Bergfeld, Mr. Jones maintained his innocence.
He maintained his innocence, yes.
You asked him you approached the issue several different ways, right? So you didn't just ask him, did you kill Paige?
Correct, I used several different techniques.
Okay, because a skilled interrogator doesn't just walk into an interrogation and say, hey, did you kill this person, right?
I've yet to find somebody that would admit with just that technique.
Okay. And so just that technique has not shown to be particularly effective, shall we
Yes,
say?
ma'am, that's correct.
So this interrogation that we've watched, in this interrogation, you used what you know and what you've learned and what you've practiced in regard to conducting interrogations.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
So I want to just go through with you a few of the exchanges that you had with Mr. Jones as you accuse him of murdering Ms. Bergfeld and some of these ways that you go at the issue with him.
Sure.
So at one point you tell Mr. Jones that maybe an accident happened, but that he saw her Thursday night, right?
That's one statement I made to him, yes.
And he replies that he did not.
That is correct.
You tell him there were 2 other people who wanted to see her that night besides Mr. Jones.
That is correct.
And he says, I didn't see Paige on Thursday.
Yes.
And he tells you again that he did not meet her and nothing happened.
Yes.
After you tell him about her stuff on Highway 50, Mr. Jones told you, quote, I haven't been anywhere with this lady, meaning Ms. Bergfeld, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And he told you I was not with Paige and I did not meet her.
Correct.
You said you were there with Paige and he replies, I was not with her.
Yes.
And he tells you, I didn't kill Paige.
He did say that.
You asked them then, did you take her? And he says no.
That is correct.
You say that you know that he was with her, and he said, I was not with her.
Yes, ma'am, he did say that.
And to that you say you were with her,
Yes, ma'am.
and he says no.
Yes, ma'am.
And a few seconds after that interchange, he told you, I didn't meet her,
That is correct.
and you confront him by saying you met her over there.
By Bob Scott, yes.
Okay, and he said, no, I did not.
Correct.
And you said affirmatively, uh-huh.
I'm sure I did, yes.
Okay.
I don't particularly remember that, but
And he says, I did not.
yes, ma'am.
He tells you again, I didn't see Paige on Thursday.
Yes, ma'am, he did not.
And then, I'm sorry, he did not tell you that, or he did?
No, he did.
Okay. And then you ask him, what about this last time with Paige? What happened this last time? And he says nothing happened with Paige.
That is correct.
He tells you again he didn't kill her.
Yes.
He says that he can't admit to something he didn't do.
He did say that, yes.
And he admits, there's a couple times, right, that he reiterates to you the bad evidence against him, right? That he doesn't have an alibi for Sunday, that her car's by his work. I feel like there's a third thing too, and that she's in the area of his work, and he says that it looks bad, but he didn't do it.
Yes, he says it.
So he acknowledges some of the evidence that you have against him, acknowledges that that doesn't look good for him, but says, I didn't do it.
He acknowledges some of it, not all of it.
Okay, some of the evidence.
Yes.
And he says, then I didn't meet with her.
Yes, ma'am.
He told you that he never met with Paige, he never called her, and he didn't talk to her, and he didn't meet with her.
That is correct. He did.
And you explained to him that you have this theory, right, that he didn't intentionally do it, that perhaps it was an accident, right, giving him that opening.
I gave him several theories. Yes, that was one of them.
And he said, I didn't do it.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, you say, I know you didn't intentionally do it, and he said, I didn't do it.
Yes.
And these times that I've reviewed here with you, these don't include what we see on the video when it's just Ms. Jarrell and Mr. Jones in the interrogation room, right?
That is correct.
So nearly 17 times Mr. Jones tells you he didn't do it.
Yeah, it was numerous times. I can't tell you exactly how many times. He verbally stated that he had not done it. However, non-verbally, his answers were inconsistent, incongruent.
Non-verbally, his answers were inconsistent and incongruent?
Yes, ma'am.
May I have just a moment?
Yes, you may.
All right. So Sergeant Weiler, you obviously have a different opinion about what went on here that's different than what Mr. Jones told you, right?
Yes.
Okay. But obviously, you wouldn't be helping the prosecution charge a man you thought was innocent, right?
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what we know from the video and what we hear on the video is Mr. Jones maintaining his innocence and saying to you over 17 times that he didn't do it.
That is what he stated, yes.
Now, Mr. Jones was there voluntarily, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, law enforcement had gone down to his work and asked him to come in again, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that this time, instead of driving himself, they drove him.
Yes, ma'am.
But at any time, law enforcement, and we see this at the end, right? Law enforcement would drive him back to work.
Yes, ma'am.
And that could have happened anywhere in this 5-hour time.
Yes, at any point he wanted to end the interview, we would have ended it and given him a ride home.
Okay. So he wasn't forced to come down there to do this interview.
No, ma'am.
And you were certainly grateful to be able to talk to him a second time, right?
Yes.
And it sounds like even in the course of this interview, he was cooperative to just change his outfit and hand over his clothes to you, right?
Yes.
And his shoes?
Yes.
Oh, and I guess his shirt also?
Yes.
And there's one time in the interview where you and Mr. Jones are talking about his camper. Do you recall that? That he brought it down from his sister's property?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and he volunteers, right, that it's unlocked,
He does.
which you acknowledge you appreciate?
I did.
Because that's going to make it easier to search.
I did.
this room that he's in is not the exact same room, is not the same room that he met with investigator Norcross in, right?
No, it's a different room.
But it's about the same dimensions,
Yes, ma'am.
so 10.5 by 8.5,
Yes, ma'am, I think it is.
and there's no windows in there.
There is not other than a mirror.
Okay, and that mirror is what the video camera goes through, right?
Yes, ma'am.
To record?
Yes.
And there's a table and 3 chairs?
Yes.
Okay, and no decorations or anything?
No decorations.
And most of the time it was you, Mr. Jones, and Ms. Gerald all in there, right?
Yes.
Now, in an interrogation, you can use deceit and trickery, right?
That is correct, you can.
So, in other words, you can tell the suspect that you have evidence of their guilt that you don't actually have?
You can, although I tend not to lie. For instance, you tell somebody that you have fingerprints and they were wearing gloves, you're done with that interview, so you can use trickery, but I tend not to outright lie.
Okay. It's your tendency not to outright lie, but you can, and you did, infer that you had evidence that you didn't have, right?
That is correct, yes.
And you can tell, and you did in this interrogation, tell the suspect that there's witnesses who said things that they haven't actually said.
I don't recall that. If you could remind me what that was.
Okay, we will in a second. I'll get to that more. But given the fact, I understand, Sergeant Weiler, you don't tend to out and out lie, but because you can use deceit and trickery in an interrogation, and you did use that tactic in this interrogation, it's hard to parse through what you're saying that's true and what you're saying that's not true, right?
For him or for me?
For you, what you're saying.
No, I know when I'm using trickery and when I'm using deception
Sure,
and when I'm not.
you know,
Yes.
right? Okay, but when we're watching it, we don't know. We can't know.
That is correct.
Okay, so here's an example. Sergeant, you tell Mr. Jones that, you suggest to Mr. Jones that Ms. Bergfeld may have been followed by somebody that Thursday she disappeared, right?
Correct.
And then you tell him that you have witnesses saying they saw a car following her the night she disappeared.
Correct.
And that, is it fair to say that was to suggest that maybe she was intercepted after she met Mr. Jones?
Correct. That was to give him an out.
Okay. So by that you mean if he would just at least admit to meeting with her, then maybe we could shift the guilt to these people who are following Ms. Bergfeld, and that would make it easier for him to at least admit that one part that he met up with her? Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, I think anytime you're trying to get somebody to confess to murder, you have to give them some dignity, and you have to give them a way out. To just say you outright murdered somebody, most people aren't going to do that, so you have to give them some way out, some way of dignity, and then once there is an admission, then you need to go through and get all the truth.
Okay. So let me take that apart a little bit. So when you're conducting an interrogation, you maybe try to get the person to admit to part of the crime, right? Like at least being in the area.
Yes.
Okay, and so if you can get the person to say he's in the area, then maybe you can get other information to come from there.
Correct.
Okay. And so by saying that, by suggesting to Mr. Jones that he can at least admit to being in the area, and then maybe we can suggest that these people following Ms. Bergfeld were the actual culpable party, that at least gets him in the area.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I appreciate you bearing with my oversimplicity
No
here.
problem.
But these witnesses who you told Mr. Jones saw Ms. Bergfeld being followed, they don't exist, right?
No, as I remember at that beginning part of the interview, or beginning part of the investigation, I remember we thought we had some people that saw a red car being followed. As to whether that turned out legitimate or not, I don't know.
Okay. Okay. But whether or not these witnesses exist, you suggesting this to Mr. Jones was a tactic to try to see if you could start getting more information out of him, right?
Yes, ma'am, that's
Okay.
true.
And he maintained that he wasn't in that area that night.
He did maintain that, yes.
Okay, now I want to talk to you a little bit about your time with Mr. Jones when you two were discussing the accident at G Road and 23 Road. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So there was an accident there on the evening of June 28th of '07, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And it ended in a fatality.
Yes, at
So-
that time I thought it was near fatal, but I
Oh,
believe it was a fatal.
okay. So obviously this accident's a pretty big deal.
It was, yes.
And it's obviously right down the road from his work.
Yes,
And so you're pretty incredulous that Mr. Jones didn't see the accident
that is correct.
because the roads were closed, right? Traffic was diverted.
There was cones and lots of lights, yes.
Okay, cones and lights. And so this seems suspicious to you, right? That he didn't see this accident on June 28th at G and 23 roads?
Suspicious? I don't know if, the point of it was that had he been there in the evening for that accident, he would have seen the accident.
Okay. Now, as a man well-trained in conducting interrogations, you know that it's important to prepare for interrogations, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and have your facts straight?
It would help, yes.
Okay, and in fact, you did prepare for this interrogation.
Yes,
So you knew that the accident at G and 23 Road actually occurred at 6:36 that night,
I did.
and Mr. Jones leaves at 5.
I did know that, yes.
Okay. But you told him that the accident occurred when he was leaving work.
Yes,
You didn't have any information that Mr. Jones had done an hour and a half of overtime that night.
I did not.
And you in fact told him that the accident at G and 23 Road you told him that would have been when he was leaving work, right?
I did not tell him the accident at G and 23 Road. There were actually two accidents that night, one at 22 and Highway 6 and 50 earlier in that evening, and then the one later, the fatality, which is 23 and G, occurred. So I knew there was two accidents. The one which I was focusing on him on was the later evening one.
Oh, the G and 23 Road one?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so you're focusing, I'm confused about that. How many accidents do you think were in that area on June 28th?
There was two, one at 22 Road and Highway 6 and 50, and the 23 and G.
Okay, and the one at 22 Road happened earlier in the day?
It did.
Okay, so what's this one you talked to him about that happens at 10:30 at night?
That was the fatal,
Oh, okay, that it was still somehow going on?
yes,
4 hours later.
yes.
Okay. But Sergeant Weiler, you asked Mr. Jones, did you know Thursday there was another accident too, right down 22 and Highway 6 and 50 Thursday night at 10:30?
I did, yes, I did ask him.
Okay, but that accident had actually occurred in late afternoon?
Yes,
Okay, so when you're asking him about an accident that occurred at 10:30, you're not talking to him about the G and 23 Road accident?
no, I was mistaken. The 23 and G would have been the fatal, the other one was not.
Okay. And did you talk to the traffic sergeant, Detective Norcross at the Grand Junction Police Department about this second accident?
I did not. I had received information about the two accidents. I didn't in particular talk with Grand Junction Police Department.
So the accident that occurs at 6:30, an hour and a half after Mr. Jones leaves work, you tell him you don't understand why you're not telling me about that, right?
That is correct.
Okay. But he wasn't telling you about that because he had left work and didn't know about it, right?
That is correct, at 5 o'clock.
But if he were, conversely, I suppose, right? If he were to say, oh yeah, I remember that accident, then you would have had him in that area at 6:30 and beyond, right?
Correct. The point of it was that had he known about the fatal accident, all the cones and roads, he would have been there later in the evening.
Okay, he would have been there at least at 6:30, maybe even up to 10:30, you say?
Yes, I don't know exactly what time, but I know that Miss Birdfield had talked to her boyfriend about the accident being slowed up by traffic.
Okay. Okay, so I see. If Mr. Jones had known about the same accident that Ms. Bergfeld was reporting, that would have put them in the same area at the same time.
That is correct.
Okay. But Mr. Jones let you know that the way he knew about the accident was from the news.
Correct, the next day.
Now, I want to move from June 28th to July 1st, 2007, and Mr. Jones going to Bob Scott to check the lights. Now, Mr. Jones told you that what he did that Sunday when he got down to the shop was that he turned into the front of Bob Scott, right?
Yes,
Walked in,
yes,
unlocked the door,
yes.
walked into his boss's office.
I don't recall that, but I remember saying, turn off the lights, yes.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure that we do get this right.
Sure.
May I approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I have here page 2,583 of discovery. Okay, so I'm directing your attention to page 135. Here, Mr. Jones says that he turned in the front and walked in. Right?
Yes.
Unlocked the door.
Yes,
Walked into Mike's office.
yes.
And saw that the lights were off.
Shop lights were off,
Okay,
yes.
sorry, yep. Turned around and walked back.
That is correct.
Okay. Do you know Mike to be Mike Singer, his boss?
I do, yes.
So when he gets there, what he tells you is that when he gets there, the lights were off, right?
Yes,
So there wasn't anything he actually needed to worry about.
that is correct.
Now, knowing what you've been to Bob Scott RV, right?
I have, yes.
Okay. So knowing what you observed from being at Bob Scott, what he tells you about entering the building and going into his boss's office to check the lights makes sense, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And that's because, well, Your Honor, may I have permission to publish People's Exhibit 600?
Do you have an objection, Mr. Waite?
We need a second to rearrange the cables on that. If you could have a second.
Sure.
If we could have a moment, Judge.
Yes, sir.
And Your Honor, there's no objection to the publication.
Okay, that's fine. You can proceed whenever you're ready. Thank you.
May I approach the monitor?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. So, Sergeant Weiler, I just want to...
I have this microphone
perfect.
for you. Thanks. It should pick you up okay.
Okay, great,
Thanks.
thank you. So right here, this door in the middle of the picture is the front door to Bob Scott, right?
Yes, on the south side.
Okay, on the south side. So, and you know on the side of Bob Scott are bays, right?
Yes,
Okay, but presumably Sunday night when the shop's closed, those bays would be shut down?
presumably, yes.
Okay, so this is the door you would go through to check the lights on a Sunday night, right?
Well, I can't say, I'm assuming so, if he said the front door.
Okay, the front door. And then through there is Mr. Singer's office, and on the other side of Mr. Singer's office is the shop.
Yes.
Okay. Now, are you aware that in 2011, Sergeant Beagley drove some different routes to get from Mr. Jones's house to Bob Scott RV?
I am.
Okay. And, so you know that that was to time the routes and see how long that takes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you didn't do any simulations, right?
I drove that route numerous times on surveillance, but not actual time and mileage.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, Sergeant, let me be a little bit more clear. Did you do any simulations to see how long it would take to drive from 3072 Hill Avenue to Bob Scott RV, drive up, go in, check the lights, come back to your car, and drive home?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you do any simulations to see how long it would take to drive from 3072 Hill Avenue to Bob Scott RV, pick up a gas can, get down the street to Walker SMS, get back, store the gas can underneath a workbench, get back in your car, and drive back to 3072 Hill Avenue?
No, I did not do any simulations.
As the sergeant on this case for a time, are you aware of any other investigator doing that?
With a gas can? No.
What you're aware of is what Sergeant Beagley did, right?
Correct.
And so Sergeant Beagley did neither the thing Mr. Jones said he did on Sunday night or the thing that the sheriff's office thinks he did on Sunday night.
I guess I'm not getting your question. Mr. Jones did not say he took a gas can.
Right. Well, I guess your understanding is that what Sergeant Beagley did was just time the route, right? Door to door, essentially?
Yes.
Okay. So Sergeant Beagley didn't do any sort of timing. Let me ask you this.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the continuing questioning about what another witness did. It's beyond the scope of direct and really isn't relevant.
Ms. Smith, do you want to respond?
I will, I didn't ask a question, so I'm not sure what's being objected to. but
Well, I
will-
think the line of questioning, you asked him if he
Okay.
did these things, he said no, and
Okay.
then you're asking about what the other witness did, I think
Okay,
is
my next
what
question
the...
was not gonna be about the other witness. What,
Okay, why don't you finish your question and then...
okay. So the question, Sergeant Weiler, is, as the sergeant on this investigation, which means you're in a leadership role, right?
Correct.
You don't know of any investigator doing any sort of timing of what Mr. Jones indicated he did Sunday night, driving from his house to Bob Scott to check the lights and then back to his house?
I can only speak for the year and a half I was in complex crime, so I don't know.
Okay. In,
Sorry, I think I still need to rule on the
Oh,
objection. The
okay.
objection's overruled.
in the year and a half you were in complex crimes, you were overseeing this case, right?
Correct.
Okay, so during that time, you don't know of that?
During that time, no.
Okay. And similarly, during that time, you don't know of anybody, of any investigator timing, driving from Mr. Jones' house to Bob Scott to set a fire in Walker SMS and drive back?
During that time, no.
Okay. And I understand, it sounds like your tenure in the complex crimes unit as a sergeant was relatively short, but you were the one that conducted this interrogation, right? Yes. Okay, and so you were asking Mr. Jones a lot about what he did on that Sunday night?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, in the interrogation, Mr. Jones talks about driving on Sunday to check the lights, right?
To turn off the lights, yes.
And he says he didn't go there to set the car on fire, right?
He did not say that, yes.
Okay, so then you start to ask him questions, well then did you at least see the fire?
Correct.
If you didn't go to set it and you were just going to check the lights, did you see anything?
Yes.
And may I approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Now, Sergeant Weiler, what I have here is a map of a portion of Grand Junction, right?
Yes.
Okay. And it goes from about little past 26 Road on the right to about 23 Road on the left, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And just north of G Road on the top to Patterson Road on the bottom?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that appear to you to be an accurate representation of this area of Grand Junction?
It does.
And let me ask you this, have I also marked Bob Scott with a yellow dot?
You have.
Okay. I move to admit Defendant's Exhibit GGG.
And just for the record, is that the exhibit that you've shown to the witness and that he's been speaking about?
Yes, it is.
Do you have an objection, Mr. Wade?
Judge, I don't object to the fact that it's relevant to show an accurate representation of that part of town. I'm not really sure what other relevance it has, so.
Right. Objections, is there an objection? I'm not sure.
No, I'm not objecting.
Okay, GGG is admitted. Thank you.
And may we publish it?
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can proceed, thank you.
Okay. Now, may I approach as well?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. So in the interrogation, Sergeant Weiler, Mr. Jones talks to you about the different ways he gets to work, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And he talked about taking North Avenue,
Yes.
and he talked about taking Patterson,
Yes.
and he mentions that he sometimes takes the freeway.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if Mr. Jones takes Patterson, he explains to you some different ways that he gets up to G Road, right?
Correct.
So let me back up a second. There's basically two ways to get to Bob Scott RV, right? You can either go north on 23 Road or west on G Road.
Yes, ma'am.
And if you go west on G Road, you take a little jog here at, I think it's 23 and 2/10.
22 and 2/10, I
Yeah,
believe.
okay. And then you go on Grand Park Road.
You can do that or go to 23 Road.
Okay. And when you say go to 23 Road, you'd be on 6 and 50 and you'd turn right or north and head straight up to 23 Road.
Or from G Road, you can go to 23 Road.
Oh, yeah. Now, let me ask you about that. Bob Scott actually sits on Grand Park Drive.
It does.
That's the entrance.
Correct.
Okay. So you wouldn't you'd still have to go on Grand Park Drive whether or not you're coming from G or 23.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
If you're getting to Bob Scott RV, to get there, you have to be on Grand Park Drive, right? At some point, that's,
Yes, from 23 Road, you'd have to take a quick right and a quick left into the parking lot.
all right. Now, I want to talk to you about if Mr. Jones takes this Patterson Road up to G Road, which he explains to you he does sometimes, right?
He did, yes.
Okay. And he mentions that sometimes he takes, does he basically explain to you, and it wasn't super clear, so I want to make sure I understand that sometimes he takes Patterson to 25 up to G Road?
Judge, I'm going to object. I don't think the evidence is based on that at all.
Ms. Smith?
Well, okay, so Sergeant Weiler and Mr. Jones have an extensive conversation about how he gets to work and whether or not he could see the fire from the way that he took. And he explains to Sergeant Weiler that he sometimes turns at the Sinclair, he sometimes turns at the bank, and sometimes he goes down to the Black Bear Cafe. That is 25, 24 and a half, and 24 Road. And so I'm showing how Mr. Jones could have taken these roads to G Road to get to work and not seen the fire.
Mr. Waite? Any other?
Well, I don't think the map shows any of the things that, that Ms. Smith just talked about. It doesn't show the Black Bear Diner, it doesn't show the Sinclair, it doesn't show any of those.
Okay, the objection is sustained. You can lay a further foundation if you wish. Thank you.
Do you know where the Black Bear Cafe is?
I know it's on 24 Road.
Okay. Do you know where the Sinclair station is that Mr. Jones referenced?
Yes.
Where is it?
Sinclair would be, it's on the north side of Patterson, and I'm not sure if it's 25 or 24 and a half Road. I think it's 25 Road.
Okay. And the Black Bear Cafe you mentioned is on 24 Road, right?
It's on 24 Road, just almost equal to Patterson. It dead ends.
Okay. And then he mentions a bank, right?
Yes,
Do you know which bank he was talking about?
not off the top of my head.
Okay. And you didn't bother to clarify that with him, right?
No.
Okay, so we got two out of the three. Okay, so if he explained to you that he takes Patterson one way, he takes his Patterson north on 25 to G Road, right?
He explained he takes North Avenue also, but when he's describing Patterson, yes.
Yeah, okay. And then when he takes North Avenue, that's where he tends to get on 6 and 50 and take 23 Road, right?
Correct, but he also talked about that he could go Patterson across to Highway 6 and 52.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a variety of combinations.
There is,
So certainly more than 3, right?
yes.
Okay. And let's see here. So if a person is getting to Bob Scott on G Road, they would take G Road West. They could take G Road West to, what did you call this?
22 and 210s or
210s, okay. Turn north on that road, right?
Correct,
And then turn left on Grand Park,
correct.
and then pull right into the parking lot there at Bob Scott.
They could do that.
And just to be clear, Walker SMS is north of Bob Scott's on 23 Road, right?
That would be right about up in this area.
Okay, and you're pointing to the the left.
It would be just to the north and west of Bob Scott.
And you, let's see, you mentioned that you conducted some surveillance on Mr. Jones as well, right?
Yes,
And some GPS monitoring?
yes.
And the GPS monitoring actually supports what he told you, which is that sometimes he takes G Road.
It supported all 3 ways.
Okay, when do you mean all three ways?
North Avenue to Highway 6 and 50, Patterson, down to Highway 6 and 50, Patterson to G-Will.
Okay. And even the interstate, right?
I don't recall on surveillance getting the interstate, and I don't recall on the GPS whether he did the interstate.
Okay. May I approach the witness again?
Yes, you may. Thank you. You're welcome.
This is on page 62. Now, Sergeant Weiler, I've handed you what's marked Defendant's Exhibit JJJ, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that appears to be a map of GPS surveillance.
I think so. It has the dots that we would normally see, yes.
Okay, and that indicates I-70?
It does. Mhm.
Okay. May I publish Exhibit 600 again?
Do you have an objection, Mr. Wade?
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is just the front side of Bob Scott's, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And there's two windows there on either side of the door?
There is.
And then the building's made out of what, tin?
I don't know.
Okay, but those are the only two windows on the front, right?
I don't recall. There
Okay.
may have been others.
Okay. May I publish 601?
Any objection, Mr. Wade?
No objection, Your Honor.
That's fine. You can proceed. Thank you.
Okay. So this also is another picture of Bob Scott RV, right?
Yes,
And there's no additional windows on this picture, right?
not on this picture.
Okay. Maybe in the, back there, there appears to be some pictures of the wash bays, maybe? Do you see those?
Off to the right-hand side?
Yeah, and I don't know if they're wash bays. I should
They're,
call them bays.
bays.
Okay. But to your knowledge, on a Sunday night after work hours, those bays would not be open?
I don't know, ma'am.
You don't know?
I would assume not, but I don't know.
Okay, and you didn't ask Mr. Petro or Mr. Singer, do you keep your bays open?
I didn't ask him, no.
Okay. May I publish 602?
Any objection, Mr. Wade?
No objection, Your Honor.
That's fine. You can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's a picture of the fence that surrounds Bob Scott RV, right?
It is the mesh fence, yes.
Okay, and by mesh you mean there's weaving in it?
Meaning you can, weaving and you can see through it, yes.
You can see through it?
Yes,
Okay, can you see through that fence?
I can.
Okay, what can you see?
I can see the buildings right here. See the opposite side of the buildings, on the other side.
Okay. Can you see any cars parked in the Walker SMS parking lot?
Right at this point, nope, not from this angle.
Okay. And do you see how there's an RV parked there?
I do, yes.
Okay. Do you know how many RVs were parked there on the evening of July 1st of 2007?
I have no idea.
Okay, and again, you never asked Mr. Singer or Mr. Petro, right?
No,
In the interrogation with Mr. Jones, you're pretty incredulous that he didn't see this fire at least, right?
I am, yes.
Okay, because he's in the area, it's a car fire, he should have at least seen it.
Yes,
Okay, but am I right that you didn't do any interviewing of the Bob Scott personnel to see how many trailers might have been obscuring the view on July 1st?
I did none of that interviewing.
And you didn't do any interviewing of them to see if they happen to keep their wash bays open, which might create a line of sight somehow?
I did not, no.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you understand, you didn't take these pictures, right, Sergeant?
I did not know.
Okay. But do you understand that, in 600, we see the front of the building, and then we're moving like 2 increments to the west?
We are moving to the west, yes.
Okay.
In this picture.
Yeah, okay. So if Mr. Jones just pulls up right to the front door of Bob Scott, you think maybe he could still have seen the Walker SMS parking lot, right?
It would depend where he's at. If he's right in front of the door, no.
Okay,
Driving up, maybe.
okay. So, and certainly if he's driving up north from 23 Road, you think he should be able to see it, right?
You would be able to see flames, yes.
Okay. But if he's coming in from the east, driving west on G Road up to the Grand, I should say this. If he's coming in from the east, driving west on the Grand Park Drive, you still think he should be able to see the flame, right?
It would depend where he's at.
Okay. And you didn't ask Mr. Jones for any clarification about where he drove up to or where he parked in the parking lot?
I did not.
Okay, you can unpublish that, thank you. Now, one of your theories that you talked to Mr. Jones about, one of the things that you talked to Mr. Jones about is that he was obsessed with calling Ms. Bergfeld, right?
Yes,
Because you asked him why he was obsessed with calling her.
yes,
And you claimed that Mr. Jones was fascinated with Ms. Bergfeld
yes,
and very interested in her. And your thought process on that was based on him calling her a lot. And one of the bases was that he called her a lot.
There were numerous reasons. Obviously, he had seen her, he had called, but he was 10 times. Knew the cost, says he's only seen him twice, yet he's still calling, so there were numerous reasons.
Okay. But certainly the 10 calls sounds like factored into that, right?
Yes, it did that.
Okay. And you reassure Mr. Jones that the sheriff's office is looking at a lot of other suspects, right?
I did.
And you mentioned to him that Investigator Gerald had actually just gotten back from New Jersey, right?
I did not, I said investigators, I just got back.
Oh, yeah, okay. You don't know that it was Investigator Gerald? Okay. And she was there interviewing George Coraluzzo, right?
I don't know if she was there, I know other detectives, but I'm not sure if she went or not, but. I
Oh,
don't know.
okay.
I know in the interview I talked about investigators just in there.
Okay, so you didn't, as her supervisor, you didn't know that Investigator Gerald was in New Jersey interviewing Mr. Corluzzo?
I had been on vacation the week before.
Oh, that's right, okay. At any rate, Mr. Coraluzzo, the man in New Jersey investigators were speaking to, had actually called Ms. Bergfeld 21 times in one day, right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. First of all, there's no indication this witness has personal knowledge, and second of all, it's beyond the scope of direct.
Ms. Smith?
I don't think it's beyond the scope of direct because as I laid the foundation for, Sergeant Weiler talks to Mr. Jones about his phone calls to Ms. Bergfeld and his characterization of them as obsessive, and as the sergeant over the complex crimes unit for 1.5 years on this case, he would have personal knowledge of the telephone calls by Mr. Corluzzo.
The objection sustained. With regard to the lack of foundation for personal knowledge.
Okay.
Thanks.
Did you review the phone records that Investigator Norcross got?
Did I review the phone records? No.
Okay. Did you review any summary?
Yes, I wrote the affidavits.
Okay. So you do have personal knowledge of how many times Mr. Corluzzo called Ms. Bergfeld on June 28th of 2007?
Not exactly.
Okay. So even though you were the sergeant on this case and were supervising Investigator Gerald, you don't know about Mr. Corluzzo's phone calls?
do know that he called numerous times, I can't give you the exact number.
Okay. Would you agree that he called an obsessive amount of times?
Sure.
And that he called an amount of times that indicates a fascination, perhaps?
Judge speculation.
I think they introduced evidence of Sergeant Weiler's speculation that Mr. Jones is fascinated. So I believe that this is a fair question on cross-examination to ask about his opinion of Mr. Coraluzzo's phone calls indicating fascination.
The objection's overruled.
So Sergeant Weiler, the question was, if you think the amount of times that you know about Mr. Coraluzzo calling Ms. Bergfeld the day she disappeared indicates he may be fascinated with her.
And Judge, again, I'm going to object. She's asking for an opinion from Sergeant Weiler at this point. We did not introduce an opinion of his that would indicate that that anybody had called an excessive number of times, or that anybody was obsessed. He spoke of that to the defendant. We did not introduce an opinion of his.
Right. The objection's overruled, given the witness's answer to the prior question with regard to the defendant. And so she's allowed to explore the basis for that statement. So that's the reason I'm overruling it. You
Okay.
can go ahead.
Based on what you know about how many times Mr. Coraluzzo called Ms. Bergfeld the day she went missing, does that also, to your mind, indicate a fascination?
I can't really say. I mean, it could be a number of reasons why you call it. You can't get a hold of the person. It could be a fascination, could be obsessiveness. I don't know.
Okay. Could just simply be he can't get a hold of her,
It could be.
and he keeps trying.
It could be.
Now, you spoke in this interrogation with Mr. Jones about what had happened with his ex-wife, Lisa Nance, right?
I did.
And you talked to him about what happened when Mr. Jones found out she was cheating.
I did.
And you related to him and how hard that is to experience, right? And how hard it is to see your wife with somebody else.
I did.
You described it as crushing.
I did.
And you acknowledged that pain can really make you do dumb and crazy things.
Yeah.
And you even related personal experience, right, with him because you could relate.
I did.
And would you agree then that the tendency to do what you call dumb and crazy things when a relationship is ending is because of some of the level of feelings involved, right? The intensity of it all.
Yes.
There's obviously a lot of emotions there, right, in a situation like that.
There is, yes.
Now, speaking of intense emotions, after Mr. Jones's first interrogation, investigators interviewed Mrs. Jones, right?
Yes.
And disclosed to her information they were gathering about Mr. Jones's use of prostitutes.
They did, yes.
And you acknowledged that Mr. Jones was feeling stressed about his wife finding out this information.
I acknowledged it.
Yeah, or you recognized it, right?
She pointed out to me that within it was 30 minutes that he had disclosed the launch of his wife.
Okay. Well, the question was that you recognize, or you acknowledge that Mr. Jones was feeling stress about that, right?
I don't know if stress was the word. I mean, he was hurt, upset, but he did that.
Okay.
I'm going to ask for a good time to take
Oh.
a break. I don't know how much longer you might be, or if this is a good time, or...
Yeah, this is a fine time. Sorry,
Okay.
I lost track of time.
No worries, that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and take our afternoon recess, ladies and gentlemen. We'll just be about 10 minutes. Thank you. Please rise for our jury. For the record, our jury's left the court and will be in recess until 3:15, please. Thank you.